Uh, Last time we started this series on Tarikh al-Tashri'a, the history of legislation. And remember last time we talked about, we just gave the introduction, which is the introduction to Mishka's book on the history of legislation, written by the president of the university, Dr. Salah al-Sawi. And in the introduction, he spoke about how the scholars inherited from the Prophet ﷺ the way he welcomed the students of knowledge, and how the Prophet ﷺ exhorted the scholars after him to always welcome the students of knowledge, and how Mishka seeks to follow in the footsteps of the Sahaba by going to places outside of the mainland of Islam or Muslimdom. Then we moved on to talking about the introduction to the book itself. This introduction is like a generic introduction to all Mishka's books, and then we moved on to talking about the introduction to the book itself. And when we talked about the introduction to the book, we talked about how it is important to understand the introductory points to any science. And we talked about the 10 introductory points to every science. And we sent a document to all of you. You should have received it. It has those 10 introductory points. And those 10 introductory points would be what? If I can get, the 10 from the audience, that would be great.
Definition.
Definition.
Subject
Subject matter.
matter. Benefit of learning.
Benefit of learning.
Founder.
Relevance. So basically definition, you know what definition means. Subject matter. Relevance is relevance to the rest of the sciences in general. Sciences within the Sharia, and then sciences in general. And the Sharia sciences would be, what's the relevance of the Sharia sciences per se to science in general? Where would you classify the Sharia sciences? Exact sciences, natural sciences, humanities? Where would they belong? Well, we would say that if you have to force us to choose one of those categories, but those categories are restrictive, because humanities are usually founded by human beings for the well-being of human beings, address various issues that pertain to humanity as a kind, but history, geography, anthropology, sociology, psychology, humanities. So, but the Sharia sciences share with humanities one aspect. It's for the well-being of humanity. So that aspect it shares, the aspect that it does not share with humanities is that the founder is the divine, is outside of humanity. So, but if you have to force us to use one of those categories, then we'll use humanities with an explanation. Okay, so that's the relevance of Sharia sciences in general. And then of the Sharia sciences, you have different kinds. You have sciences that are called end sciences, and sciences that are called tool sciences. The end sciences are meant for themselves. They are needed for their very, basically immediate usage by the end user. So the learner will benefit immediately from those sciences. That's Aqidah and Fiqh and Akhlaq. Aqidah and Fiqh and Akhlaq. Immediate benefit for the user. But you have the tool sciences. You have the tool sciences which will enable you to understand those end sciences. What are those tool sciences? Things like Mustalah al-Hadith and Usul al-Fiqh, Hadith terminology and Usul al-Fiqh. These are tool sciences that would enable you to understand the other sciences. And then you have the language as basically a supportive science that is needed for the understanding of the end sciences and the tool sciences and the rest. So you have the end sciences, you have the tool sciences, and you have the language, which would be considered by some people to be of the tool sciences. And then you have ancillary sciences, additional sciences. Additional sciences. The additional sciences would be like, you know, Hayat al-Sahaba, for instance. It's an additional science. The Sirah, for instance, additional science. You benefit from these sciences by benefiting from the role model. But eventually what you will extract from those sciences would be either Aqidah, Fiqh, or Akhlaq, right? So when you read Sirah, eventually for your own benefit, for your own usage, you're going to be learning about Aqidah, you're going to be learning about Fiqh, you're going to be learning about Akhlaq for your own usage. So where does from this general scheme, where does Tarikh al-Tashri'a belong? Since we're talking about relevance, it will belong to the basically, no, it's the additional ancillary supportive sciences, because it is not required per se, like Usul al-Fiqh is required to deduce rulings, to actually produce fiqh. Usul al-Fiqh is required to produce fiqh. Hadith terminology is required to study hadith, but Tarikh al-Tashri'a is not required. Those additional ancillary supportive sciences are not, you know, are not trivial. No, I meant to say the opposite. They are important. They are important because the better your understanding of the other sciences, when you understand the history of legislation, and that's what he talked about here. He said that although it's uncontested among the researchers in various disciplines that the history of each science does not constitute anything more than an introduction to it. Learning the history of a science is essential for its mastery. It allows the student to transcend beyond the superficial understanding of it and towards becoming one of its positive contributors. To the extent that the student grasps the history of his respective discipline, will be his love for it and his dedication towards it, or towards its advancement. And the opposite of that would cause the opposite. So it is basically to be educated on the history of the madhahib and how they evolved and who's Abu Hanifa. You know, when you hear the word Shafi'i, it is not just like a name. There is so much that you know about him, about his journeying for the pursuit of knowledge, about his interaction with Malik, his interaction with Ahmed, his interaction with Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, the student of Abu Hanifa. The process of the consolidation of the sciences, the time of the mujtahideen, the imma that were mujtahideen, and the intellectual freedom during this time, and how afterwards they started to consolidate and, you know, preserve the sciences left behind by the imma mujtahideen. All of this understanding will be essential in your better understanding of fiqh and your love for fiqh and your ability to be a positive contributor or to have a better comprehension of fiqh. So we said the definition, we said subject matter, we said the benefit of learning, we said the relevance. The virtue of fadlu, wal-wada, the founder. Yeah. نسبته وفضله والوضع الاسم, the name of the science, الاستمداد, the sources of the science, حكم الشارع, the ruling of learning the science, the ruling of learning Tarikh al-Tashri'a as well. And as far as kifaya, it's a collective obligation. It's not required of everyone. It's required of the people who are involved in the field of knowledge and studying. The sources, what are the sources of Tariq al-Tashri'a, by the way? Where the, because Tariq al-Tashri'a, you know, the contemporary sources, you know, some people started to write, the contemporary scholars, like the author of the book that we will be studying, which is Sheikh Omar Suleiman al-Ashqar, rahimahullah, and Sheikh Manna al-Qattan and other scholars that wrote on the issue of Tariq al-Tashri'a recently. But where did they get, did we have like earlier books that talk about Tariq al-Tashri'a per se as a separate discipline? No, but they got this from the books of Sirah and the books of fiqh, and sometimes from the books of hadith. It is basically like a sign that required a lot of effort to be brought together into one discipline by our contemporary scholars that wrote on Tariq al-Tashri'a. This is a relatively, as far as, you know, a discipline by itself, relatively a new discipline. And then the introduction also mentioned how the Islamic fiqh passed through many phases between maturation, strength, flourishing, brilliance, relevancy, and at times it went through stages beneath that, which where there would be stages or phases of stagnation. And it mentioned that all human sciences go through the same. Okay. So basically this will be hopefully you can read those. Basically today inshallah we'll start with الأهداف العامة من دراسة المقرر, the general goals for studying the curriculum. So the objectives of this course are concentrated in the following points: defining fiqh, its branches, and how it encompasses all branches of man-made law. So that is the first section or segment of the book. It's about the definition of fiqh, the branches of fiqh, the different topics that are under fiqh, and how fiqh relates to secular science, secular laws, the relationship between fiqh and secular laws, and how fiqh entails, or you know, includes, encompasses all of the different branches of the secular laws. Because it's not divided like this. It's not divided like, you know, fiqh is not divided like secular laws are divided: civil law, criminal law, international law. This fiqh is basically one entity. There are certainly branches within fiqh, but it has not been divided by the scholars, and we will see why they did not divide fiqh into those different categories. So this will be the first objective of the course, is to study what fiqh means, understand what it means, and how it encompasses all the branches of man-made law. Then understanding the status of fiqh during the prophetic era, as well as the eras of the companions, successors, and mujtahid imams until today. Introducing fiqh schools. So, you know, basically this particular point, so what we will do, inshallah, is we will go through each phase, and we will talk about the state of fiqh in the period of the rightly guided Khalifas, the state of fiqh in the next period, which is the period, you could say, of building. That's the Umayyad period, which ended about 142 years. That's not when the Umayyad dynasty ended. The Umayyad dynasty ended about 132. But that's like, you know, basically from the end of the rightly guided Khalifas until about 10 years after the Umayyad dynasty ended. So we'll go through those phases one by one. And last time we showed the graph of those phases. And then introducing the fiqh schools, their conception and their terminologies. And, you know, so this will be like a detailed discussion of the fiqh schools. because they vary amongst themselves. They use different terminologies. So if you read Hanafi fiqh with basically your understanding of Shafi'i terminology, you will get a lot of things wrong. So that they do have different terminologies. Introducing the science of fiqh principles or qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. Okay, so this is the table of contents, محتويات الكتاب, or the table of contents, and as we said, this book is written by Sheikh Amr Sulaiman al-Ashqar rahimahullah ta'ala, and one of his greatest contributions, and for those of you who don't know Sheikh Amr Sulaiman al-Ashqar, you can Google his name, but you may know him through his series on Aqidah in the light of the Quran and the Sunnah, because that has been translated. And there is also الثقافة الإسلامية, نحو الثقافة الإسلامية, towards Islamic culture, towards understanding the Islamic culture. This has been also translated. But he was certainly one of the greatest authors in recent times. He was given to writing and authoring books, and he had his way of doing this, which was quite clever in conveying the message in clear wording, but at the same time not compromising the scholarly integrity of the words, and was quite accepted by the vast majority of scholars. His books, his writings. So the book is divided into the following segments. The first one would be تعريف الفقه وعلاقته بالشريعة والقانون, introducing fiqh and its relationship to Sharia and man-made law. So this is basically, the first one is the distinction between fiqh and Sharia, and between fiqh and man-made laws. And in order for, just like a quick distinction between fiqh and Sharia, Sharia is what Allah intended of the legislation. Sharia is what Allah prescribed. Fiqh is our comprehension of what Allah prescribed. Fiqh is our understanding of what Allah prescribed. So fiqh may contain correct and incorrect positions. Sharia does not have any incorrect positions. So الفقه في عصر النبوة, fiqh in the prophetic era, الفقه في عصر الصحابة رضوان الله عليهم, fiqh at the time of the companions, may Allah be pleased with them. معالم هذه في تلقي الصحابة التشريع في تلقي الصحابة التشريع والعمل به في تلقي الصحابة التشريع والعمل به. Guiding principles on how the companions learned the legislations and acted upon them. الفقه في عصر التابعين, that is fiqh during the era of the successors. عصر التدوين والأئمة, the era of compilation and the mujtahid imams. مقدمة للحديث عن المذاهب الفقهية, introducing the مذاهب of fiqh, الأئمة الأربعة ومذاهبهم, the four mujtahid imams and their schools of thought. عصر التقليد والجمود, the era of taqlid and stagnation. التدوين الفقهي في عصر التقليد والجمود, the compilation of fiqh in the era of taqlid and stagnation. And we said that it is extremely important that we understand that when we say the era of stagnation, that we're not really accusing all the scholars of that era, because there were luminaries of that era that, Ibn Hajar was from that era, Suyuti is from that era, Ibn Taymiyyah is from that era, Ibn Qayyim is from that era, Nawawi is from that era. Last time I told you Ibn Qudama, relatively, he died in 620 after Hijrah, so relatively at the end of the previous one, in the beginning of the era of stagnation. But it is important that we understand that we're talking about the prevalence of stagnation, not that each and every one who shot views from that. There's just like great scholars that were from that particular period. Ibn Abdin, is from the, is just many, many, many. So it, and usually when we talk, that's the difference between humanities and exact sciences. In exact sciences, it's one. So when you talk about the era of stagnation, this means just stagnation. If you study exact sciences and then you study something like this, and then someone mentions the era of stagnation, you will be under the impression that there was nothing there, during that period. And it will be completely unfair, it's like a period of 700 years of our history. So it will be completely unfair to see it in this light, or very negative. But we're saying stagnation because we have to admit the reality that there was, to some extent, stagnation compared, at least we should say, compared to the area of flourishing, the area of just intellectual progress during the time of the Mujtahideen, which preceded the time of consolidation and the time of stagnation. And maybe for those of you who were not present last time, I will just quickly show you the graph and then we'll move on. And then the last unit, or the last segment of this book, talks about fiqh in contemporary times. I have to warn you that to study, academically, to study, like a book like this, it's not going to be always exciting. It's not going to be always like interesting, exciting, like fun to learn and stuff like that. And that's the difference between just studying consistently and academically, methodically, and attending lectures in the masjid. Because basically they tell you in public speaking, and student of knowledge should get himself to not be captive of the principles of public speaking, because they tell you that in public speaking, and this is not basically to tell you to bear with me. I certainly would bear with me because I'm not particularly interesting or exciting. But this is in general for your benefit, because you're going to come, like if you study, if you go abroad, you see a lot of scholars. If you go to like Egypt, Mauritania, Saudi Arabia, Karachi, anywhere that you will go to, you will find scholars that are well grounded in knowledge that may be quite, not given to public speaking, to put it politely. So that idea of you have 30 seconds to grab the attention of the people at the beginning of the lecture, that is true. It certainly applies to the airheads. You have to 30 seconds to grab their attention, because afterwards they're lost. But the student of knowledge should not be like this. The student of knowledge should not, be always waiting for excitement and fun, or some information that he could actually brag about, or that he could actually show off the next day. And people who have determination and patience are the people who will stick through. The course of learning, not particularly this series that we have, not in general, in your pursuit of knowledge. Not all knowledge is going to feel or to look exciting to you, or very interesting. Let me show you quickly the graph.
Just hit F5.
So basically this is fiqh and sharia. When we said that there is some degree of overlap between fiqh and sharia, correct ijtihad in fiqh matters would be the area of overlap between fiqh and sharia. Then fiqh would include, that part, fiqh includes the incorrect positions of the scholars. We cannot basically take them out of fiqh because how could we judge if we are much less knowledgeable than them? So this is the correct ijtihad pertaining to laws. Sharia would be this, and Sharia would also include aqidah and morals in addition to laws. Aqidah and morals. So that's roughly the division at the time of foundation, the time of the Prophet ﷺ, establishment between 10 to 40 after Hijrah, right? That's the time the rightly guided Khalif is building during the Umayyad dynasty, roughly flowering the first half of the Abbasid dynasty, roughly consolidation until the fall of Baghdad, roughly 655 after the Hijrah, stagnation and decline, and then possibly, which will be quite, debated if we're going through awakening or not, but possibly some awakening. It'll be easier just to
Chef, what did you?
Yes.
no, I was saying
Oh, you lost it.
no, I'm good. Okay. So the first unit that we will go over, inshallah, is introducing fiqh and its relationship to Sharia and man-made laws. The contents of Unit 1, and you will find this is not going to be in the book that we will publish, no, this is going to be in the book that we will publish. But this is, not in the original book of Sheikh Omar Sayyid al-Ashqar. This is basically like school book type. So you don't find the contents of every unit. You don't find questions and answers at the end of each unit in the original book, but this is the book that we will publish as a university, inshallah. So the contents of Unit 1 will be introducing fiqh and its linguistic and technical definition. The definition is ta'rif, linguistic is lughawi from lugha, language, and technical is istalahi from istilah. Istilah means basically the agreed upon term. So the technical term is basically the term that developed by agreement of the masters of this discipline. And then we will talk about the branches of Islamic fiqh. Islamic fiqh encompasses all branches of man-made law. The Islamic Sharia is broader than man-made law. So we will, in this particular unit, inshallah, we will talk about the definition of fiqh, and we'll talk about the branches of fiqh. We'll talk about the relationship between fiqh and Sharia, and the relationship between fiqh and man-made laws, and how fiqh does encompass all the branches of man-made laws. The learning objectives and the basically the importance of this unit, we will skip that because we will go ahead into the unit itself. So defining fiqh, but you will get a copy of this. You'll get your PDF copy of this, inshallah. So it will have everything. So defining fiqh, linguistic definition. So what would be the linguistic definition of fiqh? And I know that for you, some of this or most of this maybe you repeat it for the 100th time or more, but repetition is not bad. So the definition of fiqh, or the linguistic definition of fiqh in Arabic, it means, it refers to understanding or comprehension. Understanding or comprehension. When Musa alayhi salam was commissioned with the divine message at Mount Tur in Sinai, he supplicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, وَحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. So he was told, he was sent to the people of the Egyptians, people of Fir'aun. And then he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and loosen the knot from my tongue that they may yafqahu, which means comprehend my saying. That's the mention of the word fiqh in the Quran. Also, when Shu'aib called his people to embrace what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent him with, his people said to him, قالوا يا شعيب ما نفقه كثيرا مما تقول. They said, O Shu'aib, in no way do we nafqahu, which means comprehend much of what you said. We don't comprehend what you said. We hear it, and we may also understand the language that you speak, or we do understand the language that you speak, and we hear what you're saying. But ma nafqah, we do not comprehend. So there is a little bit more to fiqh than just knowing. There is that comprehension. At least in although the Arabs eventually will not differentiate between knowledge and fiqh in their usage, or they did not differentiate between the knowledge and fiqh in their usage, but in the first perception of the word, you feel that it means a little bit more than basic knowing or understanding. It is more involved than this. Because Shu'aib was Khatib al-Anbiya. Shu'aib was the most outspoken of the prophets and messengers. And he spoke the language of his people, so they must have, known what he was talking about or what he was saying. But ma nafqah, we do not comprehend. وتقول العرب أوتي فلان فقها أي فهما له. قال الله عز وجل يتفقه في الدين. So as well, the Arabs say so and so fulan was given. Fulan is like a generic name for any person, like fulan. So and so was given fiqh or comprehension of religion. Allah also said ليتفقهوا في الدين. فلو نفر من كل فرقة منكم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين. So then it had been that out of each group of you, a ta'ifa, or out of each larger group of you, a smaller group, ta'ifa, will be dispatched to have tafaqquh in ad-din, will go out to have fiqh in ad-din, will go out to have fiqh in ad-din, which is yatafaqahu fi ad-din, to gain comprehension for themselves in their religion. So it's basically a higher level of understanding, yatafaqahu fi ad-din, to gain comprehension in their religion. And then when the Prophet ﷺ made dua for Abdullah ibn Abbas, he said to him, Allahumma allimhu ad-din. Oh, okay, so this is a typo. Allahumma faqihhu fi ad-din wa allimhu at-ta'wil is the correct version. Oh Allah, give him knowledge of the deen اللهم فقهه في الدين. Give him a good understanding of the deen. وعلمه التأويل, and teach him ta'wil, or interpretation of religious text. So the Arabs use fiqh to denote both knowledge and understanding. Al-Fayruz Abadi said fiqh refers to knowledge or knowing a matter as well as having an understanding of it. As well as having an understanding of it. But like I said, in most of the usage of word fiqh, fiqh is a step up from just knowledge of a matter. Then Sheikh here will explain that some of the usuliyun, some scholars of usul, hold a different opinion and say that fiqh is different from knowledge. According to them, fiqh refers to a sharp state of mind that enables one to grasp certain matters, whereas knowledge is an attribute by which its possessor discerns the realities of certain matters with complete certainty. Well, the word knowledge itself, the word ilm itself, is not like a watered down word like we think of it, because you could have ilm. Ilm means, the knowledge that gives you the ability to discern the realities, the true realities, the eventual reality of the various matters with complete certainty. So ilm is opposite to dhann. Ilm is certain knowledge, opposite to dhann, which is conjecture. Ilm was dhann. So in the correct usage of the word ilm, it refers to certain knowledge, knowledge. But fiqh, basically, according to those scholars of usul, fiqh refers to a state of mind, a quality that the person has that would enable him to grasp certain matters that are subtle, that are complicated, that are not very obvious, somewhat ambiguous. Okay, so Sheikh has this opinion that he says in reality there should not be any objection to interpreting fiqh as knowledge, or fiqh and ilm. They should not be. There should not be a problem interpreting fiqh as ilm. After it has been proven that the Arabs did so, the Arabs would use the term fiqh with regards to ilm, knowledge, because comprehension is born of knowledge. Because comprehension is born of knowledge. And they would use the term faqih with regards to the alim or scholar, because his knowledge results from his comprehension. His knowledge results from their... So comprehension is born of knowledge, right? You can't be described that you comprehended the subject without knowing it. And then knowledge is subsequent also, or consequent to comprehension when it comes to the faqih. Because he is not going to be a faqih that has great comprehension unless he will not become a faqih that has great knowledge unless he comprehended what he learned. Unless he comprehended what he learned. So you have knowledge, comprehension, knowledge. Knowledge, you have to have some knowledge first, and then you comprehend it, and that increases your knowledge. Also, interpreting fiqh to mean comprehension teaches us that fiqh is associated with concepts, not individuals. Concepts are understood, whereas individuals are known. So that's another way to discern between ilm and fiqh, or ma'rifah and fiqh. Fiqh is about concepts. It is about abstract things and concepts. Okay, so does fiqh pertain to, the knowing and understanding of subtle things, or obvious things as well? So the Arabs did not differentiate in their usage of the term fiqh between clear or ambiguous meanings. Abu Ishaq al-Marwazi, or Marwazi, I should say, differed regarding this and viewed the fiqh was the understanding of the solid matters and not those that were clear and obvious. Ultimately, the issue here we have to sort out between the word fiqh and the word faqih. And we should say that fiqh would mean any type of fiqh. So basically, knowing that there are 5 obligatory prayers a day is a form of fiqh. There are 5 obligatory prayers per day. Maghrib is 3 rak'ahs. Because if you say that this is not fiqh, but this is actually the basics of fiqh, you build on this. So how could you build on air? That is the basics of fiqh. You have to build on it. You have to say that Maghrib is 3 rak'ahs, and then you have to say that each rak'ah consists of this and that. And this is what you do in every rak'ah, and if you miss part of it, this is what but you're building on, there are 5 obligatory prayers. You're building on, there is something called prayer. And prayer is obligatory in Islam. And the number is 5 prayers a day. But if someone, sat down and taught, collected a group of kids and sat them down and told them, kids, there's 5 obligatory prayers, all, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. You may not necessarily describe him as faqih, right? Although this is fiqh. What he is transmitting now is fiqh. So that issue here, does fiqh apply to solid matters? Would we consider, the knowledge of the obligation of the prayer a type of fiqh or not? We resolve this conflict by discerning between 2 things. Describing a person as a faqih and defining fiqh itself. Yes, fiqh would entail all of this, but the person will not be called faqih if he only knows the basics of fiqh. If he only knows the basics of fiqh. In this case, the word faqih would be applied to the person who has this quality, this mental quality, that would enable them to discern subtle, ambiguous, ambivalent, complicated matters or questions of fiqh. So he's saying here, Shaykh Rahimahullah says here, after he said that the Arabs did not differentiate in their usage of the term fiqh, and he mentioned that Abu Ishaq al-Marwazi Rahimahullah differed and he considered fiqh to apply only to subtle matters, he refutes the position of Abu Ishaq al-Marwazi and says this latter opinion is refuted by the fact that the leading linguists reported about the Arabs that the fiqh simply meant understanding. And that definition covers both the subtle and the obvious matters. This is further asserted by the fact that the Noble Quran used this word regarding mere comprehension. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, said about the disbelievers, what is it then with these people? They almost do not yafqahu any discourse. So Allah said, فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. Certainly Allah here was not saying that they don't have the greatest comprehension. He's saying that they don't have any comprehension. So fiqh here is used in the basically diluted, implication of it, which is still valid, which is still true. Like we said, fiqh would include even understanding the basics. That is part of fiqh. So he uses this ayah to say that Allah is not saying here that they don't have the greatest comprehension. Allah is saying that they don't have any comprehension. So fiqh is any comprehension. It's not only the greatest comprehension. But like I said, We will resolve this conflict if we discern between the usage of the word fiqh, as a verbal noun, and faqih as an adjective. Fiqh as a verbal noun pertains to all, knowledge, whether it's basic or complicated, whether it's obvious or ambiguous. But the faqih is the one who will understand that which is subtle and ambiguous. So from a technical viewpoint, fiqh now he will discuss al-fiqh from the technical or al-tarif al-istalahi or the technical definition of fiqh, but he will differentiate between fiqh in the terminology of the latter scholars and the earlier scholars. So the earlier generations used fiqh a little bit differently. He says here, rahimahullah, we have previously established that the Arabs used the term fiqh in reference to understanding and knowledge and did not differentiate that between a particular speech, science, and another. So any knowledge and understanding is fiqh. It doesn't have to be fiqh in the deen, it's just fiqh, knowledge and understanding. And another, whoever learned the science was a faqih in that science, and someone who mastered many sciences is considered to be the scholar or faqih of the Arabs in the absolute sense. That's the one who had mastery of many sciences. Following the advent of Islam, fiqh became used predominantly in reference to the science of religion, because it's greater than it's greater than and superior to all other sciences. So, after Islam, whenever fiqh was mentioned, it did not mean the same thing to that it meant to the Arabs before Islam. And, for the Arabs before Islam, fiqh could be your good understanding of the language, your good understanding of any knowledge, any science. That would be a faqih in this science. But after Islam, because the sciences of the Sharia are greater than and superior to all other sciences, fiqh was used, to refer to the sciences of Sharia. It does not mean that other types of knowledge are bad or not important, but rather less important, than fiqh, which is the knowledge of the Sharia. Therefore, when the earlier Muslim scholars used the term fiqh, they intended by that the religious sciences. In this era, the religious sciences were solely referring to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So basically, the religious sciences, we talked yesterday, those of you who attended, we talked yesterday about asking frequent questions and so on, and branching, off into too many directions, whereas the Quran and the Sunnah, with some good understanding of what they meant, would have sufficed in most cases without asking a lot about too many technicalities and branches and so on. So to the earlier generations, the Quran and the Sunnah were the fiqh. So your knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah and your understanding of the meanings and the implications of the Quran and the Sunnah was fiqh. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, may Allah brighten the face of a man who bears a tradition from us, memorizes it, and then conveys it to others. Perhaps a bearer of fiqh may convey it to one who is more comprehending than him. And perhaps a bearer of fiqh may not himself be a faqih. Which is what? Which tells you the resolving the conflict. The Prophet himself said the bearer of fiqh may not be a faqih. So he sorted out between fiqh and faqih. So, نضر الله امرأ سمع منا حديثا فحفظه حتى يبلغه فرب حامل فقه إلى من هو أفقه منه ورب حامل فقه ليس بفقيه. May Allah write in the face of a man who hears a tradition from us, memorizes it, and then conveys it. Actually here, فَحَفِظَهُ حَتَّى يُبَلِّغَهُ. Then he memorizes it to convey it. Memorize it to convey it to others. Perhaps a bearer of fiqh may convey to one who is more comprehending than him, and perhaps a bearer of fiqh may himself, may not himself be faqih. So the Shaykh says that this hadith clearly indicates that the Messenger ﷺ was referring to his words that were carried as being fiqh. The bearer of fiqh, what is he bearing here? He's saying, Sami'a minna hadith, and he heard a tradition from us, or he heard something, a statement from us. And so that is the fiqh that he's talking about. The hadith itself is the fiqh that the Messenger ﷺ was talking about. Reflecting on this hadith, it indicates that the faqih is the one who has insight into his religion, the one that has grasped the meanings of the religious texts, the Quran and the Sunnah, and is capable of deducting the rulings, lessons, and wisdoms contained in these texts. Because he said that he is hamil fiqh, but he is not faqih. So he will transmit it to the faqih, who will be able to deduct from it, lessons and rulings and so on and so forth. So that the faqih is not the one who only knows the religious text, but the one who has that mental quality, state of mind that would enable him to deduce rulings from the religious texts. This is indicated in the, and then, subhanAllah, this also can be segmented. So you may be given fiqh in a particular matter. The lay person may be given fiqh in a particular matter that was not given to the faqih. Right? Yesterday we said that Imam Ahmad, when he was asked about who should we ask or whom should we ask after you, he said Abdul Wahhab al-Warraq, which was not really of the most famous students and scholars, or students of Ahmad and scholars, but they told them, they pointed this out to him, and he said, مَعَهُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ مَا يَجْعَلُهُ مُوَفَّقًا أَوْ مُسَدَّدًا, that he has enough of خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ, of Allah's fear, that will make him deserving of guidance. تَوْفِيقًا تَسْدِيد. So here, the idea here is, you may be given fiqh into a particular hadith that will there will be more than the scholar in the technical sense, what the scholar was given in the understanding, and eventually fiqh should move people to act upon it. And al-faqih, as al-Qawnawi says in Mu'jam al-Alfaz al-Fuqaha, al-faqih is the one who knows the evidence on the rulings that he mentions and acts upon those rulings. So he knows the ruling, but it is not enough to know the ruling. He will have to know the evidence and how the ruling was deduced from the evidence. And then the last step, which is the most important one, is that you must act upon your knowledge. And if you miss any of those three steps, you're not the faqih in the true sense. So this is indicated in the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, perhaps a bearer of fiqh may convey to one who is more comprehending than him, and perhaps a bearer of fiqh may not himself be a faqih. The phrase is more comprehending than him. Means more capable of knowing the intent of Allah, His rules and His legislations. The phrase not a faqih means incapability of deducing the rulings and facts that the texts imply. Because he knows the hadith, He carries it, he conveys it. And then, so that's why some of the humble scholars of hadith, and not all the scholars of hadith don't know fiqh, but some of the humble scholars of hadith, they used to say to the fuqaha, Ya ma'shar al-fuqaha, nahnu as-sayarifa wa antum al-atibba. We are the pharmacists and you are the physicians. So we have the medicine, we give it to you, but you know how to use it, to prescribe it to the patient. And the fuqaha, plural of faqih, among the companions and the successors were well known. So, you know, the companions used to, you know, point out the fuqaha amongst them. They used to be well known. In the hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari on the authority of Anas ibn Malik regarding the spoils of war that Muslims obtained from the tribe of Hawazin, you know, when the Ansar felt bad because they did not, or some of the Ansar felt bad because they were not given from the spoils of war, and some of the, you know, the new Muslims were given a lot from the spoils of war, the Prophet wanted ﷺ to reconcile their hearts by this, and they felt somewhat bad. The Prophet ﷺ brought them and he told them, what is it that I heard about you, that you were upset and so on. And he said, what are these words which have reached me about you? The so it says here in the report, the fuqaha, قال له فقهاؤهم, the fuqaha, the learned among them, said, O Messenger of Allah, as for the wise among us, أما ذو آرائنا يا رسول الله فلم يقولوا شيئا. As for the wise among us, O Messenger of Allah, they did not say anything. Here. ما حديث بلغني عنكم قال له فقهاؤهم أما ذو آرائنا يا رسول الله فلم يقولوا شيئا. Also, when Umar ibn al-Khattab wanted to deliver a sermon regarding an important issue during the Hajj season, Abdurrahman ibn Auf said, and he probably wanted to talk about succession in Islam, you know, rulership and succession and things of that nature, and shura, consultation. So Abdurrahman ibn Auf said to him during the Hajj, there are mobs of people, and I see that you delay this matter until you arrive in Medina and consult the people of fiqh. Basically, you know, egalitarianism does not mean that there is no difference between the people. Egalitarianism, that you give the due rights to all the people, and they're equal before the law, and because, you know, that is extremely impossible. You know, not all physicians are the same, not all engineers are the same, not all plumbers are the same. And when you want like a plumber, you know, when you have like a real problem at your home and you want like a real good plumber, you ask around and you discern between, you know, this and that. So also, in matters of public interest, you don't have to consult all the people and give equal weight to unequal opinions. You know, there has got to be some element of discernment here. Now, so how does this, you know, apply to the concept of democracy? Well, democracy with basically like more Sharia compliant Islamic understanding could be applied, but within the spirit or the rules or the basics of Islam. So basically, we're not going to bring the people, we're not going to, you know, consult the people on the prohibition of this or the lawfulness of that. It just doesn't make sense. None of the fuqaha ever said that the public will be consulted about, you know, matters, or they didn't even consider the position of the public relevant to the establishment of ijma'. Ijma' is the agreement of the Muslim scholars on a particular matter at a particular time. It is not the agreement of the Muslim public, because eventually, why are you talking about biochemistry when you don't, when you ever studied any book on biochemistry? It's just basically like that. So now the democracy will be, utilized to because Al-Hal al-Aqd in Islam include the representatives of the people, right? Al-Hal al-Aqd, it included the chiefs of the tribes and so on. Those are the representatives of the people. So through democratic process, you could elect people's representatives. However, those people have to understand that when the issue that is discussed is a technical issue, that they really need to pay attention to the experts. So if it's about healthcare, you really have to pay attention to the experts. It's not like I think, I like, I presume, I this. Why don't you think to the experts who have knowledge? Even as representatives of the people, you should listen to the experts who have knowledge. Otherwise, the decisions will be based on mere whims or mere pressure or mere the so-called political positioning. You figure out, where you should place yourself on the political spectrum. Because if you move a little bit to the right, you lose those people. You move a little bit to the left, you lose the other people. And based on your district, you calculate your own positions based on your district, because your district happened to be liberally leaning, your district happened to be socially conservative, your district, so that political positioning, this is not, how could this be a good process? Anyway, so that is what Abdurrahman ibn Auf said to him. You now want to discuss some important affairs, wait until you go back to Medina, sit with the fuqaha, and talk about these issues. That does not mean that after due consultation with the fuqaha, you're not going to make the matter public, and you're not going to educate the public on the resolutions or the decisions or the conclusions or whatever. You will educate the public, you will involve the public to a certain extent, but eventually you cannot involve the public on every matter, whether they have the ability to comprehend or they don't. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, who saw the great successors in Medina like Sa'id ibn Musayyib and a few of the young companions like Anas ibn Malik, said, I saw the fuqaha of our land, Medina, always performing taslim after every 2 rak'ahs of their daytime prayers. When they prayed, sunnah during the day, they did not pray 4 rak'ahs back to back together without a taslim in the middle. They always did taslim after each 2 rak'ahs. As Zuhri said, but he said that he saw the fuqaha of our land. All of this is to say that they distinguished between the faqih and the one who is not particularly a faqih. The word fuqaha was prevalent in hadith literature and in the statements of the companions, the successors and their successors, which refer to the people with deep insight into the religion of Allah and who understand the connotations of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Prophet. The characteristics and qualities of the faqih were manifest and well known. The Prophet ﷺ alluded to some of these qualities in his hadith. For example, he said, one of the signs of a man's fiqh is to lead a moderate life. This was reported by Imam Ahmad in his book Al-Musnad, but the traceable one to the Prophet that is not particularly authentic. The one that is from Abu Darda is Hasan, is sound. But usually the scholars have more liberty because they're using this just to show you a concept, not to prove any new ruling or anything. So they do have some liberty to use hadith that may not be particularly authentic and within that context. So the Prophet ﷺ said, من فقه الرجل رفقه في معيشته. من فقه الرجل رفقه في معيشته. One of the signs of man's fiqh is to lead a moderate life. Rifq here does not mean gentleness. Rifq here means moderation. And in fact, Abu Darda, the version that's traceable to Abu Darda is stronger, we said, right? So Abu Darda had actually spilled something, or something fell, like, some grains or something, and they found them looking for the grains and picking them up one by one. So someone said, you don't have to worry about this, Abu Darda. Someone from the Tabi'een said, you don't have to worry about it. You're just picking. It's like someone who, dropped some rice grains and picking them one by one. So that is what he said to the man when he said that to him. In fiqh الرجل رفقه في معيشته, one of the signs of a man's fiqh is to lead a moderate life, a life of moderation. So he considered this not to be an act of zuhd. He considered this to be a life of moderation, not necessarily zuhd, that he's picking up the grains one by one. So he also said one of the signs, the Prophet ﷺ, this hadith is authentic from the Prophet, he also said one of the signs of a man's fiqh is to say about that which he does not know, Allah knows best. من فقه الرجل أن يقول لما لا يعلم الله أعلم. من فقه الرجل أن يقول لما لا يعلم الله أعلم. One of the signs of a man's fiqh is to say about that which he does not know, Allah knows best. It is also the statement of the Prophet ﷺ here. من فقه الرجل إقباله على حاجته حتى يقبل على صلاته. And this was also reported from Abu Darda. One of the signs of a man's fiqh is to procure his needs before he initiates his salah. And in some reports, حتى يقبل على صلاته وقلبه فارغ, and his heart is empty of all concerns, or free from all concerns. His heart is free from all concerns. So basically, to finish what you need to do. You want to eat, go eat. You want to use the bathroom, go use the bathroom. You want to talk on the phone to someone, go ahead and do it. Your kid is coming, in 5 or 10 minutes back from school. Wait until he comes and you open the door for him, and then you talk to him and this and that. And then do the prayer afterwards. We do the opposite, right? You just want to do the prayer so that you could get to your business. The prayer is your business. So finish your inferior business first so that you can concentrate on your superior business. And then the Prophet ﷺ used the word fiqh here. He said, a man lengthening his prayer and shortening his sermon is indicative of his fiqh. إن طول صلاة الرجل وقصر خطبته مئنة من فقهه. A man lengthening the prayer and shortening his sermon is indicative of his fiqh. Something that's also quite frequently overlooked, right?
Lengthening the congregational salah or his personal salah?
Lengthening the congregational salah, that is in reference to Jummah. That you take your time. However, you have to also understand that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we used to come out to him 5 times a day to learn. 5 times a day. You would have been considered a hypocrite if you were not seen coming to the masjid. People would really think very bad of you. Abdullah ibn Maktoum, he was blind, and the Prophet did not give him a concession to pray at home. So 5 times a day you have exposure to the knowledge 5 times a day. Then certainly khutbah al-Jum'ah of the Prophet ﷺ, if you go through them, they're very short. But certainly khutbah al-Jum'ah in this case is not for the majority of the people, this is their only meal, per week. So it has to be larger than if they were taking smaller, meals throughout the week. So don't think bad of the khutbah, because it is just the only time they catch those people. Yes.
What about with regards to Salat al-Fajr? Because during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to pray in the earlier time, and then after the assassination of Umar radiallahu anhu, they moved it towards the end of time. So do you shorten the number of ayat that you read for Fajr due to the end of time?
Because you're praying towards the end?
Yeah.
But you don't have to pray towards the end now, so because if the purpose of this is basically to not, is for security and safety and so on, you don't need to do this at this point. You don't need to pray Fajr later. You should pray it earlier, like they used to do it during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But certainly, if you you want to make sure that you finish the prayer before sunrise.
Speaking of Jumu'ah and the length of the khutbah, I was actually having this discussion with somebody, and a similar point was mentioned that it was different during time of Prophet.
But that does not mean that your salah would be qada if you continued through sunrise, because it has actually been reported for many Sahaba that they can, Abu Bakr, the sun rose. He started early, just like usual. So, but the idea here is you want to do this. It's better that you finish before the end of that time slot.
I've heard points similar to what you had mentioned about the khutbah being different than the time of the Prophet. One, because they saw it more frequently. 2, because they understood the Arabic more because it was their native language. I personally feel like that length of time is kind of a hidden treasure of the Sunnah, because like we often hear academically that the attention span of the average person is like 5 minutes. That's what they're going to retain the most in a lecture, for like the non-academic person. So I feel like even though that's the only source of information that a person might be getting during the week, over a long term they'll retain more per khutbah and then gather more. So I feel like that's still kind of a benefit. No?
Have you ever tried to give a khutbah in 5 minutes?
Not 5, but I mean like less than half an hour. 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you can get a lot.
But nowadays most people nowadays do it in 25 minutes, half an hour, right? Most of the masajid do this. Yeah. But some of the scholars, the other side to it is that some of the scholars said it is not as short as you guys think, because the Prophet ﷺ used to sit for rest in the middle of the khutbah. So it means that it was not as short as most people think. So it certainly wasn't 5 minutes, because you would not need to sit for rest in the middle if it was just 5 minutes. But at any rate, like half an hour is reasonable. Half an hour is reasonable. But like back in Egypt, the khatib could actually go for a couple of hours. Non-stop. You wouldn't even need to sit. Full of energy. It's just like once you got your hand on those people, just don't let go of them. So as per
Would it run into Asr then?
Well, sometimes they do. So as previously mentioned, the early generation of Muslims used the term fiqh to denote the entire religion, not just a specific aspect. Entire religion. So fiqh did not particularly refer, because we will talk later, maybe next time, inshallah, about fiqh in the, more the terminology of the technical terminology of the more latter scholars. But earlier, Aqidah was fiqh. Akhlaq is fiqh. It is the general understanding of the religion. According to them, the faqih was he or she who was concerned about the fundamentals before the detailed injunctions. And basically when we say he or she, it is not to be politically correct. Because no one would argue that Aisha was a faqih, no one would argue that Hafsa was a faqih, no one would argue that many of the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ were fuqaha, and they were sought after for their knowledge, and they taught men and women afterwards. So this is not basically modern political correctness, it is true. So the faqih was he or she who was concerned about the fundamentals before the detailed injunctions. You know that the woman could be a mufti, right? The position of the mufti is not gender-based. Before the detailed injunctions, the fundamentals and was concerned with the actions of the heart before the actions of the limbs. That's the faqih to the Sahaba, to the Tabi'een, and so on. For that reason, Imam Abu Hanifa entitled his treatise on theology, Aqidah, al-Fiqh al-Akbar, the greatest fiqh. So Kitab al-Fiqh al-Akbar by Imam Abu Hanifa is not on you open the book, you don't find any of what we call fiqh. It is about Aqidah, but he called it al-Fiqh al-Akbar because it's the greatest fiqh. الفقه كان يشمل في ذلك العهد علم العقيدة وأحكام الفروع والأخلاق. So in that era, fiqh was all-inclusive of creed, legal rulings, and morals. So why did the scholars separate the technical rulings of the practical actions of the limbs from the rulings of the heart and so on? Because basically the progress of any science or the progress of any knowledge would mean more divisions, more classification, categorization, separation of disciplines. So the fiqh rulings that pertain to the body, parts, or the actions of the body and the tongue are different in nature from the fiqh that pertains to the heart, right? So when you read about ujb, self-conceit, and you read about ahkam al-tahara, and you read about ahkam al-zakah, ahkam al-tahara and ahkam al-zakah are closer to each other than self-conceit, than the talk about self-conceit or not? Yes. They sound very, so that's why they said that this is one discipline, and then these are the other disciplines. This came with a price. Sometimes you wonder, this is the natural progression of things, and it came with a price. So maybe the right mix is to still separate the discipline, but infuse the discipline of fiqh with the talk about the wisdoms of the Sharia, to talk about the importance of the niyyah and so on, and ikhlas. So you just infuse the books of fiqh with that, but you still will need to separate between the disciplines because that's the natural progression of sciences. So Ubaydullah ibn Mas'ud, Sadr al-Sharia, rahimahullah, referred to the sciences of creed and rulings on specific legal judgments and morals he advocated this opinion, and he said, oh, so he said that fiqh referred to the sciences of, he said that fiqh referred to the sciences of creed and rulings and specific legal judgments and morals. He said in the early times, fiqh referred to the knowledge of the hereafter, knowing the nuances of the self, aspiring for the hereafter, and belittling the worldly affairs. However, I am not saying that fiqh did not deal with the fatwa or legal edicts and practical rulings. He said that this is what it dealt with. This is what it meant when someone said fiqh and faqih. So that's why when Al-Hasan al-Basri, someone said Al-Hasan al-Basri, ya faqih, he said to him, woe unto you, have you ever seen a faqih? You know, you have not seen a faqih. Because what you consider to be fiqh, our knowledge that we transmit, that you consider to be fiqh, is not the real fiqh. And that's why Imam Abu Hanifa said that fiqh ma'rifatun nafsi ma laha wa ma alayha. Fiqh is the recognition, is one's recognition of what is on him and what's for him, what the rights and obligations. The rights and obligations of the nafs are not only limited to the bodily actions. Similarly, Ibn Abdin said the fuqaha are those who are knowledgeable regarding the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are committed to practicing them. For limiting the term fiqh to knowledge of the detailed rulings is unprecedented. Is unprecedented, you know, he's talking now not unprecedented in his time, because Ibn Abdin lived about 300 years ago, rahimahullah. So, much later than the time of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in. But he's saying that this move from how fiqh was understood during the earlier generations, the first 3 generations, towards how it is technically understood by the latter generations was unprecedented. So this is further supported by the saying of Al-Hasan al-Basri, a faqih is one who shuns this worldly life, aspires for the hereafter. He's the one who has a deep understanding of his religion, consistently worships his Lord, employs wara, pious caution, abstains from violating the honor of the Muslims, refrains from indulging in their wealth, and remains a sincere advisor to them. So he said, إنما الفقيه المعرض عن الدنيا الراغب في الآخرة البصير بدينه المداوم على عبادة ربه الكاف عن أعراض المسلمين العفيف عن أموالهم الناصح لجماعتهم. A faqih is one who shuns this worldly life, aspires for the hereafter. He's the one who has a deep understanding of his religion, consistently worships his Lord, employs wara, pious caution, abstains from violating the bounds, the honor of Muslims, refrains from indulging in their wealth, and remains a sincere advisor or counselor to all of them. So that would bring us to the end of this talk about fiqh according to the terminology of the earlier scholars. Hasan al-Basri is from Tabi'in, and that used to be their definition. And it's very smart of the author to conclude this particular segment with this statement of Hasan al-Basri. Next time, inshallah, we'll go over fiqh in the technical definition of the latter scholars, or the latter generation. قل قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.